Hi, thanks so much for joining in. You're watching BQ Prime. This is an earnings conversation with the management of Metropolis Healthcare. I'm joined by the promoter and managing director, Ameera Shah. Ameera, thanks so much for taking the time. Let's talk about the key highlights for the second quarter. You've seen core business growth of about 13% or thereabouts, but what stood out to you?
Thanks for having me join. The quarter, I think, has been better than quarter one as we expected. It's been about a 13.5% growth year on year for the core business. We expected it to be a little better because usually in quarter two, monsoons usually lead to a higher number of infections, leads to more testing. But having said that, the monsoons were delayed this year, and therefore we haven't seen, at least in west and south of India, we've not seen that many infectious diseases in the quarter two. We have seen some of it fall into October in west and south, but in north of India, I think dengue and some other infectious diseases were much higher in Q2.
Okay, what can you tell us about the network and how it is increased in the quarter gone by? What the intention is by the end of the year? And what kind of metrics can you tell us if you break down that core business itself into the various sub-segments? What has grown the best?
So I think generally, if you look at it, we've been managed to get out of this 13.5% growth. What strikes me the most is that our volume growth has been 10.5%, which has actually been higher than what it was pre-COVID. So, this worry about post-COVID competitive intensity, all of that, I think in a lot of ways people have been able to understand that Metropolis has been able to not only keep competition at bay, but able to really grow well. And the RPP growth, which is revenue per patient, has been about 3%. So if you look at our expansion, it's been quite aggressive. Not only have we opened 15 labs in the first half of the year, but we've added lots of hundreds of centers. And it's not only about adding the center, right? Finally, it's about making the center productive and being able to drive patients walking in. Now, that comes from the strong brand connect and trust that we have with doctors, and especially with specialist doctors who want Metropolis quality report for their critical treatments. And they will recommend to the patients to come into Metropolis because they know that they're going to get a good quality report from there. So I think the network expansion is helping us provide access to people who don't have the quality, access to best quality diagnostics, and to really increase the breadth of the brand.
Okay. I see your premium testing or your premium services have also gone up quite substantially in the quarter gone by, but the margins have reduced versus the comparable quarter. Is that because of pricing pressure, or is it because of the mix changing?
Actually, neither of them. Yes, margins have been a little bit lower this year than they were last year, but it's actually because expected. So 2-3 things have happened. One, we had a large government contract last year, which came to an end in February of 23. And therefore, the operating leverage of that large government contract is playing in the margins in the first half of this year, or the first 9 months of this year. So almost 1.1% has been lost because of that. The second thing is that, as I mentioned, we've added 15 labs in the first half of this year, which is CapEx, but the operating losses that they incur obviously comes and hits your P&L. Now, if I look at this compared to that last year, we had hardly added 2 or 3 labs in the first half of the year. So another 2% dilution is happening because of the additional lab expansion. So if I was to, and the third thing is that we have taken a one-time exceptional cost in this quarter, which is an additional 1.1%. So this actually explains the difference of the 3% difference between 2.5% actually difference between last year and this.
Yeah, and I think you've spelled that out very well in your investor presentation also. It's very clearly detailed. In terms of, and you've already talked about what you've added, in terms of the next year and in terms of heading into the next year, what are we talking about in terms of expansion and in terms of how these, so when you talk about the vintage, Ameera, of the labs that you have, at what point does that margin contribution really kick off?
So actually what we see when we start these new labs, the first year obviously got an operational loss. The second year we managed to break even. And the third year we find it coming to close to group margin. Okay. So usually it is a 3-year period where we see this coming and not getting diluted. Now labs that we started, we started this program in FY21. So it's going from FY21 till FY25. Now, the number of labs we covered between FY21 and 23 was a little bit lower because we were still in COVID. We did, I think, about 30 labs between FY21 and 23. And we're doing 30 this year. And we'll do 30 next year. So therefore, the labs which were started between FY21 and 23, by next year will stop dragging on the margin. But obviously, the 30 labs which have started this year will continue to drag next year. So, it's a rotating game. And the idea is after FY25, once we have expanded these 90 labs in these 4 years, which would actually increase our lab expansion by 50%. We currently have about 180 labs. We would then slow down on the lab expansion, and we would actually again pick up the pace on collection center expansion. And then it would be all about building franchise spokes to feed these labs more and more. So automatically, the margin dilution that is happening now will automatically get added back post
FY25. But we're peering all the way out, Ameera, to 27, if I'm not mistaken, and saying that the real ramp up in the gains on the margins will come in at that point because there will be no dilution then or limited dilution from the addition of new branches. Am I reading this correct?
No, I think from FY26, we would start to see obviously margins move up. Like I said, because the older labs would start making money, while obviously the current labs would start moving to break even. So what happens is automatically the margin dilution will reduce. So by FY26, we believe that the margin expansion should start happening. Where we are currently, I think if I keep aside just the one-time costs of this quarter, we are at about 25.4% reported EBITDA. If I keep that aside for a minute. The goal is that this year, we should be closer, to the margin that we were at last year. So I think then it's really about only waiting for the margin dilution of the lab expansion to go away and for that margin accretion to start happening from FY26.
Fantastic. So I think we've covered quite a bit of ground and I look forward to seeing how that pans out. Exciting times ahead. Thank you so much, Ameera, for speaking to BQ Prime. Always a pleasure.